Welcome to Still Processing, a 76ers podcast. On today's episode, we break down the offseason for the Philadelphia 76ers, some of the additions, subtractions. In addition, we take a look at the ongoing drama, both James Harden and Joel Embiid related. And then we take a spin looking on the positive side of things, looking at Tyrese Maxey, his locked in the gym focus mentality, his contract extension that will eventually come, so the Sixers say, and also the outlook for new head coach Nick Nurse. All that and more on the first episode of Still Processing, a 76ers podcast. Welcome again to Still Processing, a 76ers podcast, the newest, the latest, the greatest edition in Sixers podcasting, the latest for PSN, Philly Sports Network's podcast tree. Really a hello and a welcome back of sorts. As you may recall, us, both myself, Zach Chavalella, and my main guy, Justin Crosby here, and we will be bringing you the latest, the juiciest news and some behind the scenes for the Philadelphia 76ers for this season and going forward. So, Justin, for the first episode of Still Processing, I just got to say, how you doing, man?
Good to be back.
Absolutely. Ain't that
the band is back together.
Absolutely. Yeah, up for a fresh ride, but a little bit of the same, a little bit something different, and we are very, very much looking forward to it. As many people are getting a little bit, I would say, kind of stir crazy as we continue to ride around this processing ride. Just a reminder to everybody, hey, we're all still processing, all right? And that's now and that's going forward. That's just Philadelphia basketball, and that's just what the truth is, So we'll be bringing in some of the Sixers news. Like I said, myself, Justin, our producer Uriah Young, our the producer Andy Quach, okay? And we're going to be bringing you a lot of this great Sixers news and some of the not so great stuff. And so when we talk about the not so great stuff, of course, we talk about this offseason for the Sixers. Let's try and focus on the positive as best we can. It's the only way we're going to process through this. But let's look at some of the additions. They brought in Patrick Beverley, veteran guard. They brought in Mo Bamba, who I would say, in addition to Paul Reed, is I would call the best backup center. I would even put him potentially above Andre Drummond in terms of backups that Joel Embiid has had. So, Justin, what are your initial thoughts of those two additions, Pat Bev and Mo Bamba?
Honestly, I like the Pat Bev move, although I feel like it's 2 years too late. I feel like, he was brought in here, definitely needed a defensive-minded guard as well. But you would think that, with James Harden's situation, maybe they were trying to appease James and, they want him to stay. But I think overall, it might be, a couple years too late, but I do think Pat Bev still has enough in the tank to contribute. I don't say on a nightly basis, but, contribute to the team as much as he can. Defensively, I think, is where they're going to really need him. And I just think that the best thing about his signing is the havoc he's going to cause and how much he's going to feed into the crowd stuff. And I just can't wait for him to get a crazy steal or get a crazy flop offensive foul on the other team and him waving to the crowd like he was in Minnesota when they won that that playing game. So I'm excited about that. Mo Bamba, you know what? I'm a little bit on the iffy side. Mo Bamba has a lot of potential, offensively and defensively. But just didn't work in Orlando for whatever reason, maybe because Orlando has 17 centers and power forwards, and it just didn't necessarily fit. He has some versatility, though, which I do like. Which we've seen him come off of down screens and shoot threes and stuff against the Sixers. So he has some versatility, different a different type of style, but I'm just a little bit on the curious side on that one. He is a backup, so he's coming in understanding his role, but I'm a little bit iffy on the Mo Bamba. What about you?
Yeah, looking at Bamba first, like you said, it didn't really work out in Orlando. Didn't really work out in LA even. An injury was certainly a part of that. I do wonder what Mo Bamba is going to look like in this, new Nick Nurse Philly system. Does having a coach such as Nick Nurse change some things about Bamba, how he's used? Bring out some of the real kind of diamonds in the roughage that is Mo Bamba, and kind of maximize his potential almost. We talked about his kind of two-way ability. His ability in pick game is definitely clear. He's not only going to be a real big target in the roll game, but also he can pop and he can hit that 3 too. You can even not that they would place him in the corner too much, I don't think, unless they're pairing him with Paul Reed, which again is a possibility. But he can kind of wear a couple different hats for you, and I got some real value for that for a bench guy. So Mo Bamba's at the veteran minimum. I mean, I say it's a quality move just because what do you got to lose? You still have Paul Reed who can back him up if the Mo Bamba experiment doesn't go well, and he has a chance to thrive playing alongside Bamba too, or playing alongside Reed, I should say.
And I understand that, especially at the vet minimum signing. It's just something about I don't know. You've heard things about. Well, I've heard things or read things. I won't say heard things, but I'm not.
I already know where you're going with it. Yeah, no, you're right.
Things about his, just his attitude and his work ethic and stuff like that. So just wondering what that would be like. But maybe you're right. Nurse and his apparent crazy mind and antics. Maybe he'll bring out the best of him. And Joel. Joel will probably bring out the best of him by cooking him in practice every day. So he'll have to come with his A game.
Well, that's the thing, is are they going to bring out the best in each other, or are they going to bring out the worst in each other? I trying to be a hopeful optimist would say the former, and look at these two guys who they are competitive with each other, going up against each other as much as they will now going forward. Hopefully they do bring out the best in each other, and they don't kind of fall into some of those, not desirable tendencies that we've seen from both of them on occasion. But that's kind of, I feel like, where Pat Bev steps in a little bit too, where, you mentioned how he might not be a contributor every night. Maybe on the box score, he may not be a contributor every night, but if I'm being flat honest, I see his energy, his basically acting almost like a player coach of sorts. I see that impacting the Sixers almost every single given night. I mean, you look at how he impacted the Bulls. It wasn't his stats that led to that Bulls team getting better. His veteran presence, his determination, and again, like you talked about getting the guy 2 years too late. Like, that's just the story of Philadelphia, if you ask me. But like Pat Bev in particular, I think is a guy who goes beyond what he puts on the stat sheet. So I think from that perspective, he can still definitely impact the game. So he's not going to be. I mean, listen, if they do move on from Harden, which of course it's looking like they will, do I see him starting next to Tyrese Maxey? Of course not. I see this being a reserve role, but I think that Beverly can play that role fine. It's just finding that balance between knowing how to maximize him and not overtasking him at the same time, because there's just certain things that you can't expect from a player of Beverly's skill set, and also at this point in his career. You have to understand what you're getting, and I think you are getting a lot, but you have to understand how to utilize that and maximize it. So that's a job for Nick Nurse, and we'll see if he's up to task for that. But that's a lot on our additions here. Again, Pat Bev, Mo Bamba, it's not the sexiest offseason, right? But I mean, when you look at the vet minimum, it's like you can do a lot worse, and the Sixers certainly have in the past. But if we take a turn and look at the subtractions, we're losing a couple fan favorites. I mean, Shake Milton gone, George Niang gone, and then traded acquisition last season, Jalen McDaniels gone as well. Like, to lose all three of those guys, especially Shake Milton and George Niang, that hurts, not only on the court, but that hurts in the fan heart, So What of this did you take away? Who was the biggest loss, do you feel? And how do you think the Sixers can kind of overcome and mitigate these losses?
So I think the biggest loss to me was Niang, just because of his willingness to shoot, no conscience. I feel like Niang is one of the first guys Sixers have had who just know their role and is to shoot threes, open, contested, whatever, just to get those 3-point attempts up. Because as we know, if it wasn't for Niang and some of the other quick trigger, maybe Harden sometimes, but just more so like quick trigger guys. I think that spacing will be missed for Joel. I think Joel trusted Niang as well. So I think he'll be the biggest. I mean, Shake, fan favorite. I don't feel like he always got a fair opportunity under Doc, but when he was given minutes, especially this past year with the injuries to Harden and Maxey throughout the season, that he did deliver where he was supposed to. So I'm looking forward to seeing Shake in maybe possibly a better role, more playing time in Minnesota, maybe. And then McDaniels, to be honest, I mean, we didn't get a really chance to see enough of him to really determine like what type of impact he would have on the team going forward. You would think that because they traded Matisse and traded a high second-round draft pick, but I think that the Harden stuff just muddied the waters for everybody. I mean, I think free agents may have wanted to stay, but it was just like, who do you get back in the Harden deal, right? So, like, is there going to be room for McDaniels? Is there going to be room for Niang? Although the Sixers might have liked them back, but, he got a bag in Cleveland, and there's no way you could turn that down. So it's like the Harden stuff muddied the waters for everybody, to be honest with that. But, I mean, as far as mitigating what we lost, I mean, I think Shake was a offensive combo guard first, which I think allowed, him to feed off of Embiid and be more of a scorer and stuff like that. So I do think that they'll miss that because Beverly will not do that. I mean, they still have Melton, who is, has some offensive game as well, but it's not the same
But
as
might
having
be
Shake.
stepping into a starting role too. That's the other
Yeah,
thing.
yes,
So your
I
bench is
agree.
lighter.
I agree. And then, as far as like McDaniels, again, we didn't really see enough to determine what it was going to be. I mean, he showed some flashes, where he could contribute going forward. But I think one thing, and that's nitpicky, but he fouled too much. And I think
He did do that. Yeah, that's for
yeah, and I
sure.
think that like I'm not saying that guys don't get in foul trouble in the league, right? But I'm just saying like
Yeah.
if you're counted on to be a top 7 guy, top 8 guy, even a potential starter, right? Because there's a point in time we think that hey, he might be Tobias' replacement, right? Like
Yeah.
foul too much, can't trust him to be on the court enough. So I can see why they may have allowed him to walk. But yeah, again, I just think the Harden stuff muddied the waters on the money for everybody. And the
Yeah.
playing time or potential positions, like you miss Sam McDaniels, but then say if you get, I don't know, from the Clippers, I'm just making it up. Say you get Morris back and Batum back or something like, what I'm trying to say? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say the James Harden stuff did kind of muddy the water a little bit for not only who they have, but other potential free agents. Alongside of that, what I would say is that it kind of changed the whole future dynamic for the Sixers. If Harden doesn't opt into his player option, I do think that there is a world, an alternate universe in which the Sixers do bring back some of these guys and invest a little bit in free agency, because you're talking about essentially 35 million. When I say off the books, that's not open cap that you can use, but obviously that it would give you different implications as far as what exceptions you can use, which bird years you can implement for certain players, being able to retain. I think George Niang's contract, although great for him, very happy for him that he got that. It probably would have been a little irresponsible to bring him back at that number. Cleveland got a great player, obviously. They certainly compensated him for it. So I think it probably not in Philadelphia's best interest to match that. But when you look at Shake, yeah.
And I never want to say overpay, but I think they really, like, you can tell they really,
for
really,
sure.
really needed spacing and shooting with the lineup that
Yes.
they do with Mobley and Allen and stuff like that. And I think they
And they won the
overpaid
bidding
for him.
war, you know?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what you can say, that they won the bidding war for him. And
yep.
that's, congrats to Cleveland, congrats to George. Wish him the best of luck. It's something that was clearly too rich for Philadelphia's blood. And I think that might be kind of a mutually beneficial decision, even though, it is tough for the fan base to lose someone, and the team too. Niang was well liked and respected in that locker room. I'll be honest with you, I'm going to kind of miss talking to him after the game, because he was one of the coolest, most down to earth guys in that media room post game. But life goes on. When you talk about guys like Shake Milton and Jalen McDaniels, you're talking about guys on kind of smaller deals where it's a little more. It seems as though it would be more realistic for the Sixers to have retained those guys. Shake Milton, obviously, you're losing that offensive weapon, like you mentioned. It just kind of felt like Shake's time to go, and I wish I wasn't saying that, but a lot of that is just the inconsistency that he saw, and the lack of aid from the coaching department that he saw in his time here. Just for his own sake, for his own growth, I think another opportunity is wise for him. And then Jalen McDaniels, I mean, you talked about him fouling too much. Just one thing I want to bring up with that, and not that Jalen McDaniels, it would have been title or bust with Jalen McDaniels. But all this just to say, like, you have a young player who's taking on a little bit more of a role, and if he fouls too much, maybe you should give him some minutes in the regular season where he can kind of iron that out and get a little bit better on that end. Like, that's just a thought. So in Toronto, I'm sure he's going to have a bit more of an opportunity to do that. And if he has the right coaching too, maybe eventually overcomes that fouling issue. We'll see. Maybe it's something he never overcomes, but you kind of can't decide that without giving him the opportunity. Not that's what you were saying, of course, but that's kind of how it felt in Philadelphia, where he was kind of damned before even given the opportunity. So good luck to all three of those players. Definitely going to be sorely missed, especially talking about Shake, talking about George. But when we look at the roster as a whole, would you even be able to say, or what end do you fall on? Is this team, as it stands right now compared to last year, is it better or worse than it was this time last year?
I feel it's worse. And I feel it's worse because I feel like you have to have some optimism with a new coach and stuff like that, right? But I just think the roster is in flux, right? Moves could have been made. There are, of course, other guys out there, whatever, but who still haven't signed yet and who could be waiting. It's like a lot of dominoes to drop, right? The Dame stuff, the Harden stuff, whatever else comes about. But I just think that worse because, yes, there are the same players, core players as last year, but I just feel like the drama and the roster and flux makes them be in a worse position. I mean, you're definitely losing some shooting and some athleticism, but like I said, I just think that because the trade stuff in the roster and flux, I just think that it leaves the Sixers off in a worse position. Now, if something happens and they get some different pieces and before training camp and stuff like that, I feel like, we might be able to have a different conversation. Then again, I do understand it's the same core pieces that were a win away from going to the Eastern Conference Finals. I do understand that, but I just think the situation is totally different. Last year seemed to be much more of a normal offseason, much more, preparation going into training camp on what the roles were going to be. Nobody knows what the roles are going to be. The only thing we know is that Joel Embiid is the reigning MVP, and he's probably the constant. We know that Maxey is, and we'll talk about that later, expected. It's a lot more is expected of him, specifically from his coach, who has called out and said that he wants to put Maxey in different positions to succeed and be better, right? And then after that, what do we know? All right, if Tobias is on the team, which it seems like he is, all right, we know what we'll get from him. But after that, like, everything's in flux. So,
Yeah.
I say worse.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's an easy question to answer, but that doesn't make it a pointless question, if that makes sense. I think it's very easy to say that they are worse this time than they were last year. But you really have to get into the why behind that, the reason why that is. And like you pointed out, it's the James Harden situation. And this is why, some may be pulled to say this is why Daryl Morey needs to solve this problem ASAP. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think more so the stance should be this is why Daryl Morey needs to get the James Harden move right. Where even if it doesn't happen within the next day, the next week, shoot, even the next month, if it's the difference of getting an extra first round pick or getting an extra contributor during the season, we can talk about star hunting all we want and trying to bring in another superstar level player. But if we're talking a little more realistically, if playing hardball like this does lead to an increase in assets of what you're getting in return for James Harden, then yeah, that'll be worthwhile, and that will potentially change the outlook on the situation. I mean, if you're theoretically getting, let's say, two players, and if you're getting two players for Harden, you're talking about like Norm Powell and Marcus Morris, if the money's right. If you're talking about just that versus a package where you're getting, I know Terrence Mann hasn't been the end all be all of the deal, but let's say he's included in a first round pick plus Powell and Morris, and you send back PJ Tucker to play with James Harden again, like that already is a better deal than the first one of just Powell and Morris, So it's it all depends on what the situation ends up unfolding as, which if there's one thing that this situation is, it's absolutely unpredictable. We'll get into more of that just a little bit, but that is absolutely the word for it. So we don't know what's going to happen between, listen, August is almost over, but this could all change drastically by September. Like that's how volatile the situation actually is. So, we'll see what kind of happens going forward. As of now, the team is worse, but Nick Nurse said it himself. And this is kind of where you get almost like a little, it's like a pro and a con at the same time, where you hear your brand new coach say that the roster is expected to look significantly different by opening day effectively. And on the one hand, you're like, oh, okay, well, they'll probably solve the James Harden situation by then. That's good. And then you're also thinking about how, hey, my coach is going into his first year with the team with a team that's going to look significantly different by, the time that tip off of game one of the regular season starts. Like at what point is he going to have enough time to kind of iron out those details and really even game plan for having those guys? So that's kind of the struggle facing the team.
Right. And I think that Nurse I think that Nurse and maybe Morey's thinking right we got the core pieces. These are the things that we've done the last couple of years. Your job is to tinker with whatever we have, right? And whatever, try stuff throughout the year and use whatever roster we have and go from there. And I think that they feel like, and when I say they, I mean Morey, Brand, Joel, you could say the owners, whatever, they feel that to get them over the hump is they need more creativity. And maybe that's what they're focused on, right? Because, I mean, he's going to do new and different things regardless who's on a roster or not, right? So if it's James Harden in the role, cool. If it's somebody else in the role, cool too. They're still going to do whatever he wants them to do as far as these new things. So I think ultimately, I just feel like Nurse is like, listen, just get me a team, a competitive team by the time we get to the playoffs, right? Like, or trade deadline. And I have the MVP. I'm the one who's probably guarded him the best in the league with all these gimmicky, but different strategies. Let's make sure that throughout the season we work on getting Tyrese Maxey more involved or better chances and getting better. So when the playoff time comes, I can do these little mad scientist stuff and we could, get past the hump. So I don't think it's necessarily like new coach roster and flux thing. I just think that at this point, Nurse knew what he was walking into. And honestly, during his press conference when he was like, we would like James back, I feel like he was lying through his teeth. I feel like he just go, right? They expected him to leave anyway. So I
You
mean,
got the feeling it was part of the interview was talking about the lack of Harden's future in Philadelphia. So
yeah.
I think if anything, it is something that. Well, I'll put it to you this way: no matter what way it is resolved, few people are looking forward to the situation being resolved more than Nick Nurse. But as far as what the game plan is going forward, I do think that there's a lot of merit to what you're saying as far as Nurse effectively making the game plan around Harden, around Embiid, rather, around Tyrese Maxey. And I think a lot of that was shown because the organization, and whether this is truly how they feel or if they're trying to spin positively the PR of his still pending extension, whatever the case may be. But it seems like they're really leaning into the Tyrese Maxey is our other star angle. So, if they do find a way to maximize Maxey, obviously that is fantastic. I think Tobias Harris is going to play a large role with the team this season. Personally, I don't even expect him to be dealt at the trade deadline with how this whole season has gone. But if they can kind of figure out the generic plan and then really just kind of plug in guys as they go from there on out, it is kind of the benefit of having an X's and O's coach like Nick Nurse as opposed to a legacy coach like Doc Rivers, where you can kind of do that kind of stuff. But really it's not going to matter unless you kind of figure things out with the big fella. That's where it starts with Philadelphia. That's going to be Nick Nurse's priority. That is the Sixers' priority. Like, among everything else, James Harden drama, building the new stadium, and I'm not talking about just Josh Harris. Josh Harris's priority is the stadium. But if you're talking about the other guys, Joel Embiid and making sure that he's maximized and satisfied, that is a priority for the 76ers. And that's kind of what makes you can understand to a degree kind of some of the social media mind games that he's played a little bit. He's Joel Embiid. We know this. Like, this is not new. Like Maxey said on his podcast about the Harden situation, like, this isn't our first rodeo as far as Joel Embiid's social media trolling either. But amidst like all the social media games, all the trade rumors, everything like that, it's up to Nick Nurse. It's up to Daryl Morey. And I would even say to a degree, Tyrese Maxey, just to kind of keep Embiid satisfied. And that doesn't just mean like this isn't like catering to his every need. This is like putting together a respectable team where Embiid can demand a trade at any moment. Any player can demand a trade at any moment. But if you don't give him a reason to, then it really speaks a lot more volumes about that player than it does the organization. And that's what the Sixers can't afford. They can't afford to give Joel a reason to ask out. And knowing to a very small degree, how he just over the past 10 years that he's been in Philadelphia, how he tends to think, how he views himself in relation to other players over history, I think it would take still even more for Embiid to seriously entertain the thought of leaving. But it is something that you kind of have to be on orange alert for if you were the Philadelphia 76ers. So just real quick, I only want to kind of super touch on this real fast before we get into the James Harden situation. But the social media games for Embiid, tired of them or no?
Honestly, I don't really care. And I don't really care because, and I know that's not the best take, but I just don't care because this is who he is, right? He's always been that guy to do the different things on social media. And he calmed down a little bit, but that's just in his nature. That's his personality. And listen, it is what it is. Like, he's human like the rest of us, right? So he knows what's going to rile people up, just like he knows like what will rile him up. Like, I'm sure this situation with Harden, like, he's probably annoyed with, right? Stuff with Ben probably annoyed him. Like, so it's just like, I'm playing for this franchise over and over again. Some stuff is happening, right? Like, the owner is talking about me, right? Like what is happening on Twitter? So it's like, I just feel like that is who he is and how he copes or deal with whatever is going on. And if it's him trolling the fans, then I mean it is what it is, right? I mean, I would rather him troll the fans in the city instead of flat out going to Ramona Shelburne and telling her that he wants to trade. Like, seriously, like whatever way he has to get his steam off, cool.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point that I never really considered. Like if that's the alternative, I don't know that it's exactly one of those or the other, but if that is him kind of blowing steam, kind of venting, I think that most people in Philadelphia would, and maybe they wouldn't say this openly, because they'd try and the go-to reaction is so emotional in Philadelphia, and it's the best and the worst thing about fandom in Philly. So you'd probably get a lot of negative reaction, even if it was just him venting, blowing off steam. But all the same, yeah, is it better than him going to Ramona? Is it better than him just actively saying that he wants to be traded? And this is more so like how you add more time for the Sixers to rectify the situation. Like if that's the case, then yeah, that's a positive spin there. Really, what it comes down to me is like I honestly there are days I just get so sick of Twitter, man. Like it is like I've seen amazing things and been a part of amazing experiences on Twitter, and then there's certain things that and everyone's experienced both sides of this. I feel like where it's just mind numbing and exhausting, and it's not a shut up and dribble kind of thing, because like Joel, yes, is a basketball player. Before that, he's a person. So if he's frustrated, like absolutely express that frustration. That is absolutely, every human's right to express that kind of frustration. I would much rather him openly call out the team on Twitter. And this isn't realistic, but if he, not quite what James Harden did in China with Daryl Morey, but if he tweeted out like this is some bullshit, like about like the latest situation, like I would prefer that over, the is he talking about a football match or is he talking about basketball? Like that's my only thing. Like I'm just not one for trolling. Joel is, and that's up to him, man. But I'll be honest with you. I also just need a break because just all Sixers fans, I feel like, need a break right now because not only is the Joel Embiid situation kind of mind-numbing, but the James Harden situation too, which we're going to fly through this because I want to talk about some positivity, okay? But with James Harden, man, listen, we made it through Ben Simmons. We came through the other side. And I'll tell you this, we went right back in that desert. It did not take long, but Sixers fans are right back. It almost feels like where you started, but also a little bit worse. Like, you look at a guy like Harden, he somehow has less trade value than Ben Simmons in that situation. He is, I think, a stylistically more useful player. Just when you think about him kind of in a vacuum, which is the only problem is that James Harden doesn't come in vacuums. You're kind of more so looking at a situation where he plays to the beat of his own drum, which is it's whatever. It's cool for him, and if that drum ends up going to LA and, that's great for him. That's totally cool by me. But it's just, I feel as though it's definitely reached the point where it has to change. It's just a matter of still making sure that you get the proper compensation for it. I think Daryl has come to reason with that. There's been a lot of, we're hoping to bring James back. We're hoping to bring James back. I think that's kind of like coach speech. I don't really think that that's still kind of legitimately on the table because how could it be? Especially after the comments in China where he calls Morey a liar and then the NBA has the investigation. Harden has to cough up $100K. And yeah, the Players Association is kind of trying to fight it, but it's also kind of like, we're just kind of doing this because this is a prominent player and we kind of feel like we have to. Like, I feel like everybody kind of understands that like this fine is gonna stick and it probably should, So with all this James Harden situation, what is your, I guess, like your pain tolerance left for this Harden situation? Are you in that stage where like you need this done tomorrow,
I'm numb, baby.
Or are you holding out hope?
I'm numb, baby. We've been through so much.
They can't hurt you any more than they already have, it sounds like.
No, it's just like meme or something or like
Yeah.
video or on
Oh
Twitter.
yeah, this is fine. Yeah, the dog in the
Yeah, that
fire for
or it's like
sure.
it's this
Yeah.
thing where it's like somebody just getting beat up at a bar and somebody put like
Yeah.
this is what other fans think it is like being a Twitter, like being a Sixers fan where I cannot be
Yeah.
hurt. Like I cannot be hurt. Like I'm numb. I like I've seen and we've seen so much, right? Been a part of so much these last couple years with this team. So it's like nothing can hurt me. We can
Yeah.
somehow the Sixers could somehow flip James Harden for I don't know. Somehow get Paul George in the deal, or maybe
Yeah.
somehow get DeMar DeRozan, whatever. Like they just flip it for another guy, or they can flip him for whatever, two peas in a pot, and I wouldn't be surprised either way. And it's just we've just been through so much, so it's like I wanted to be over, but then it's like I don't care because I want the team to be successful, of course, right? That's obvious, but
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like you have been given this gift of Tyrese Maxey. Just let the wings fly and hope that he can continue to show the improvement that he's shown every single time. Every single time he's shown improvement.
Yeah.
And just allow him that room to grow. And yeah, right, you might not get to Eastern Conference Finals next year, but Tyrese Maxey being much improved going into the latter stages of Joel's career, I think is better for the team than putting all your eggs in the basket and trying to, because like to me, flipping for a new star, a new star, a new star, that hasn't worked. We finally got some homegrown talent that's putting the work in to be better. Yeah, he can't help that he's 6'2" or 6'1" or whatever, but he's working to be better every summer. And I have super faith in the kid that he'll be able to be better. So I'm like, yo, just let the guy walk. If you get Norman Powell back, cool. You can flip him later for something else. But let this be Maxey's team and Joel's team, and we go from
Mm-hmm.
there. Simple. That's just how I feel. So that's why I
Yeah.
have the
I
pain
mean,
tolerance, because I'm like, Maxey is going to be the key here anyway. No matter if he's
yeah.
here or he's not here, there's going to be emphasis on him being better, learning how to, I don't say learning because he's a basketball player, but
Mm-hmm.
getting better on the pick and roll, which is making
Yeah.
those long corner passes, being able to get other people open. I think that is going to be his biggest thing. And just playing with more pace, like be a little more herky jerky. You so fast, stop and let somebody running back at you like Trae Young does,
Mm-hmm.
and get an easy bucket, like stuff like that. I think when he gets more savvy to his game, it's over. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think about the fact that he's still so young. Like he is going to develop. And I get the numbness. I would say just my, I'm definitely over it, but I don't know that I'm quite numb. Like you're talking about the memes earlier. Like, if I'm anything, I'm the Simpsons meme. Like he's already dead. Like just enough. Like you got to stop. Like I'm just, dude. I can't take, much more of it, but it's the thing is that there's always more of it, like that's the thing is, we've lived through the process, there's been worse times than the process in Sixers fandom history, and then even looking at greater Philadelphia fandom, the Phillies are I believe they're still the most losing organization, the most losses, in history, maybe not percentage, but most losses in baseball history. Like and the Eagles have gone through their doldrums. Obviously, the Flyers right now, like there's been a lot of losing in Philadelphia, so we're used to it, But at a certain point, like it's not just losing a situation. Like this isn't like the Sixers aren't good, which to a degree feels like you almost like kind of can't help. This is, hey, the guy who was brought in to save us is now actively trying to destroy the team a little bit. And so that's where it kind of gets.
Can I jump in? Can I jump in on
Yeah,
that note
go
right
for it,
there?
man. I'm sick of talking about it anyway.
Yeah, I'll just say the guy that we actively like that we wanted is to save us, actively trying to destroy the team. I just feel like I agree, and we did hope that Hart won't be the one. This is the guy. We got that. We got our guy. We did it, Joe. Like that's what it was
Mm-hmm.
like. But
Yeah.
I come back and I look at him and say, what has he done his last couple stops? When things are not going specifically the way he wants to, this is how he acts. So it's no different. So we shouldn't be surprised at all. Like no fans, Maury, Joe, like nobody should be surprised. I'm a
Yeah.
firm believer, and my mom told me this a long time ago. When somebody shows you who they are, believe them. And he's done it
Mm.
multiple times. So, like, I'm not necessarily, I'm just not necessarily surprised. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like, hopefully we can be over. Hopefully this gets resolved and we can just have a pod about what we got back, or that's it. But we'll probably be having a pod about how he came to training camp looking like me. So I don't know. Maybe that's
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm ready for Big Mama's House 3. I don't know about you, but like we're gonna get back to that, at some point. Maybe we'll see. But like you were right. You were talking about kind of being numb, and part of the reasons the positivity of Tyrese Maxey's, supposed continued development, which there's no reason to doubt that he's going to continue to develop. There's no reason to doubt that he's not a part of the future of this team. When we talk about the contract extension, which we mentioned earlier, how he has not been extended yet, it seems very obvious why. And while it may not be the most secure of answers for Maxey and his camp, it's because it messes with the cap situation next year. So, come next year, do I think the Sixers are going to give Tyrese Maxey a max contract? Yeah, I absolutely do. And to have that that rookie scale max extension, I do think is just a reminder is it's a bit more of a it's not always a steal of a deal, but it's a lot more palatable than like the superstar max, obviously. So to bring him in on that, to be able to do that after signing some free agencies with some of the projected cap space the Sixers are going to have in 2024, assuming that the roster doesn't look much different otherwise than it does now. That's something that I do think is kind of bright for the future, where you talk about being able, like if Joel Embiid is happy and satisfied in Philadelphia, if Tyrese Maxey's seen that growth, if they are able to add a free agent in 2024, and we're not here to talk about 2024, but because they insist on bringing it up, we will mention it. The other thing that really is just all that's left to be seen is, what does Nick Nurse do with this team this season to show what he's got going forward? And I'll be flat honest with you. I got to, from everything that I've heard from all the Sixers players who have spoken openly about Nick Nurse so far, I got a pretty good feeling about it. I mean, listening to Tyrese Maxey, listening to Jaden Springer, I don't know, what's your quick outlook and prediction as we wrap up? What are your thoughts on what Nurse is going to be able to do this year?
I just think that I'm curious to see just the different things that he brings, right? Like we didn't really see a lot of creativity, right? It's like you talk about creativity in basketball and coaching. It's like you can point to lineups, you can point to strategies, you could, all that stuff. I just think we'll see a little more different strategies. I think we'll see, like I was talking to one of my friends and I was saying, like, don't be surprised if we see a lineup at the end of the third quarter, the last like minute and a half or 2 minutes, you give Joel a break. I don't know. I'm just making it up. Give Joel a break, and then you see Melton, Beverly, Paul Reed, you see Bamba, and then you see like, I don't know, another wing, I don't know, House, or even get Maxey, and then he just says full court press, like trap. And then you just have this super fast lineup that's just trying to trap and create havoc and get to, like, these are the things that we would never see, like you said, with like a legacy coach like Doc, because I mean, he won a championship and he's had a lot of regular season wins and a lot of playoff wins too. And those things have worked in the past, so why wouldn't they work now? So, but I'm just curious to see like Nurse's lineups and some of his creativity and how he's going to give Joel the ball. I mean, I know Joel probably still get it on the elbow, but just more creativity on Joel. Like if you don't have the quote unquote playmaker from Harden, like what that'll be. So I'm curious to see.
Yeah, I mean the elbow's still going to be a factor, but give me more pick and pop, give me more outside shots altogether. That's something I think is if you extend Joel's range, which he's more than capable of doing, you're gonna just extend his career. You're gonna make him, I think, even though it's technically a less efficient shot, I think you will make him more overall effective as a player. And then obviously Nurse has talked about wanting to kind of improve him as a facilitator, as a passer too. I think that's going to be the major focal point for Nick Nurse in this offense, is kind of making him that Marc Gasol plus, like Gasol was for the Raptors. So we'll see how that goes. You're doing that with a reigning MVP. It's probably going to be a little bit of trouble, just at first adjusting to a slight change in role. But it's not as if you're making him go from like the number one guy to the number two. So that should help kind of ease that transition a little bit. And I love your press idea. One only thing is we got to take out Maxey. We got to put in Jaden Springer, because I do think that he's going to have a role on this team going forward. Yes. And that lineup defensively does sound nasty. So yes. I do feel pretty good about Nurse going forward. It's going to be a lot of wait and see. But that's just kind of the state of the Sixers right now. It's a lot of wait and see. It's a lot of just kind of bearing our souls to each other as we go through these off-season struggles. This is the worst, flat out. Like, there's no other way to put it. This has been the worst off-season for the Sixers in a long, long time. So, this has been therapeutic. This is what you got to have to do sometimes. You got to lean on each other, Sixers fans, during this time, because at the end of the day, you just got to remember that myself, Justin, all of you out there, we're just still processing. All right. We're going to catch you guys next time.
Peace.